All right, welcome everyone to the mentoring session for COSEM membership. I'm Tovi Scruggs Hussein. I appreciate your taking time to either join us live or watch the video here. We are going to be exploring today really how mindfulness plays a role in anti-racist education and how we can have a heartfelt approach to healing educational trauma and the equity work that we have in our lives. I'm not setting this up really as a sit and get. I'm hoping that we're going to have some good conversation as well. But in true fashion, I think it's important that we just at least do 1 minute, just one mindful minute to gather ourselves and to anchor in the space, especially because we're going to be talking about equity and that can sometimes be dysregulating. So just taking time to center together in our own connection and this work of humanity. So I just invite you to be still and close your eyes or gaze down and just take 3 deep breaths. And then after your 3 deep breaths, just breathing at a pace that feels good to you. What is a pace that feels nourishing to you in your breathing? And I give you the invitation to think of a word to anchor you in presence today in our time together. What is a word that captures the feeling tone for you and how you want to experience our time together? Allow yourself to think of this word. And I invite you to see this word in front of you, kind of floating in front of you. And then on the inhale, breathing that word in and seeing it swim around your body on the inside. How is that word floating around in you? And on the exhale, blowing it out into the space that you're in. And allowing that word to just completely surround you and permeate the space. And then breathe the word back in. Allow it to swim all around. And then exhaling it back out. And one more time. And appreciating the feeling tone of that word. I'm going to ring the bell. When you can no longer hear the bell, please take that as a sign to be fully present, eyes open. Wonderful. So we just want to do a light check-in for everyone who's present. Maybe sharing what word captures you in this moment and why are you here today? What has brought you into this space for this topic today? And whoever wants to go first can go first.
All right, my word was open-minded. And so that's what brought me here today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara.
I'll go next because my word was open. And what brought me here today is I'm just following whatever COSEM has to offer. I attended the conference in February, right before we all got locked down with COVID. And I retired to take care of grandchildren and help my kids, but I'm committed to the work of connecting people and getting this into schools and for educators. So I'm trying to, and the equity work was a struggle at my school always for me. So I want to hear any ideas for how I can share any of that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that. Kyrie or Terry?
I think open is a great word, but I was more, I guess, encouraged with everything that's going on right now. I've had a heaviness,
Yeah.
and I feel one, I'm open because I won't believe that there's not more good in the world
Mhm.
than what we see. But I'm encouraged every time I get to come into a space like this because I think it gives me the freedom to let go of some of the heaviness and hopefully get back to myself.
Lovely. Thank you.
For me, mine was I wasn't really on the thought of equity. I did come to your offering tonight because this is a world that I spend a lot of time in. I'm always looking for more examples, and I've used mindfulness within my school being the big push of equity and anti-racism for a while in my school. And for me, it was productivity. There's a lot of things that I do, but I have not been productive on some things. And watching you do your mindfulness and equity together and have it in is as powerful as it is. I wanted to see an example of somebody doing their craft at a very high level. And I'm here to learn and also assist when I can for you because I appreciate your work and I think you touch a lot of people. So
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Now I'm scared. No, seriously, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Again, I'm just happy to be in the space with people who are taking this work seriously and looking to grow ourselves as leaders and professionals. And I use the term leader for anyone who's showing up for even their children, their grandchildren, a community. Seriously, it's like, I love Brene Brown's definition of a leader, anyone who's showing up to do the work and lead processes to improve people and the courage to develop that potential. Like it's coupled with the courage of being willing to do that. And so many of us are leaders in the work. Our time together today is also rooted in the chapter that I was able to offer for the COSEM anthology in our book. And I just also wanted to hear from folks kind of where you are so I can try to customize a bit on the fly as well. I came to this work, like speaking of the heaviness that Terry's really naming, I came to my big epiphany aha moment around the power of mindfulness in our equity work, because I, as a Black woman leading this work with mostly white educators, was really feeling the heaviness and frustration that I think Cindy's even naming of the work not taking traction in schools, and yet so critical that it does take traction in schools because of the people that we serve throughout our school system. And I was frustrated, I was hurt, I was angry, I was getting re-traumatized, I was losing connection to I think the gentleness and softness that I was initially born with and like to lead with, that connected me to kids. And as I was further removed from kids to lead the work, kind of was getting on me to be different. And I didn't want to be different. I wanted to be the same person, just with adults. And backtracking a bit, before the epiphany around this work and how it supports our healing and racial healing work, I really went into having a mindfulness practice around 22 years old because my mother, and a lot of you know this story already, passed away from AIDS when I was in 9th grade, and that was in 1986. And so my life changed dramatically. I became very focused on school and becoming an adult and how to kind of get on my own and make sense of what my life was going to be as an adult. And she really embedded college, that message into me. So I was like, okay, do really well in high school, get to college. And once I did that, I kind of had to start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do with this part of things? And I realized that I was just in a lot of pain too, trying to make meaning out of what I had experienced in my education up to 22 years old. Now I'm 22 years old teaching teenagers, and I'm like 4 years older than some of them. That was interesting. And then the pain of just my mother's death and trying to make some meaning out of that. I was really fortunate to meet an alternative healer, an African medicine woman is what she calls herself. She lives here in Oakland. Love her very much. And she introduced me to some other women as well that really were just connected to their own spirituality, their own connectedness to their inner voice, their inner self. And that's when I first learned about what it truly meant to teach an empowerment model, was when they said to me at the age of 23, you don't need to go to someone else to get what you need. It starts with you, and that you have what you need. And then you'll find your teachers along the way, the people who are going to intervene and support your growth on your journey. But it starts with you. So they were like, really, young woman, sometimes little girl, go sit down and be quiet and just breathe. That was literally what they told me to do oftentimes. That was, of course, balanced with some other activities, but it was really initially this empowerment model of just connecting to your own breath and being present to the inner landscape and the inner experience, and then getting support and making some meaning out of that. If you ever ran up against any confusion or roadblocks, if you will. And so it was not attached to any religion. It was not attached to any particular belief system, other than we have this wonderful gift that's been passed down through the ages. And so I started doing it with ninth graders. I just started saying, this is feeling really good. Let's just try this in class. And this was, 1996, 97, when this was not the cool thing to do. People definitely didn't talk about doing it. And they certainly weren't saying to their classrooms, we're going to sit and meditate for a minute and just be quiet. And the kids were so receptive. They were so receptive and wanting to continue to do it. And I thought, this is something really magical and special about this, where I had teenagers saying to me, you know what, Miss Scruggs, why are you always so happy? Why are you feeling, good? Why do you have this kind of attitude? And and then I shared with them the practice, and then we would just continue to do that. So long story short, into this, I went into administration, and the conversations around our disaggregated data, the conversations around standardized testing, and the negativity in talking about kids of color when talking about the data wasn't resonating with who I knew my good colleagues to be. Loving people. Yes, they were white, but it had never really been an issue until this whole test score conversation seemed to come into play. And things were highlighted where, they would talk about those kids, or why are they pulling down our school? And it was just such negative language, and it was not making sense to me. I'm like, these are not racist people. These are not mean-spirited people. These are people that I go to dinner with, that I hang out with, that I spend weekends with, being collegial and making friendships like a lot of staff will do. We make friendships with those that we teach in the profession. And I ended up going on a silent retreat. And on a silent retreat where I was really doing a lot of soul searching around how to not abandon public education. Welcome, Jennifer. On how to not abandon public education, I just was like, how can I stay in this? And literally, I just felt this inner knowingness that I had this breakthrough where compassion, like I got so triggered by the fact that I could be compassionate, and how could I be compassionate towards those I was leading? And it was particularly white people. And so what did it mean to not vilify, to step out of emotions that felt angry, to step out of emotions that felt like I was hitting my head up against a wall, and to try another way? And so it led me to this framework where the initial part of the framework was shared with me, but then it was, I built upon it. And I call it the awareing framework, but it talks about why we do our what is called inside out work. What is this inner work? And so we have this circle here, this inner circle, that we have our lens of how we view the world. And then that informs my values, my beliefs, my assumptions. That's going to then determine my interactions. And that influences our beingness. It influences those values, beliefs, and assumptions. And then we act on those things. We act on that. And then it gives us the outcomes because we're not interrupting anything that would be quote unquote negative or racist or not inclusive. And then I started to realize our conditioning is showing up, and we have no one to blame for our conditioning. We get our conditioning very honest. And I was overwhelmed in that sit that I had on the silent retreat. I was overwhelmed with tears. And I literally was asking myself, where are these tears coming from? And I was experiencing, at least that's how it was kind of happening in my own spirit, I was experiencing the pain and frustration that white people must feel, being in a profession that they love, doing what they love, being with the kids that they love, and not being successful. Like the pain of being in your calling and not being successful because there's something that's keeping you from it, in a sense that no PD was really going to fix. Like we've been having the same conversation for 50 years now. The majority of teachers are generally white middle-class women. The majority of kids that we teach are not. And so the conditioning was an exploration of peeling back the layers of shame, of guilt, exploring how we developed our beliefs and our values. And then how are we holding what I call a dual awareness? That's where the outer ring of awareing comes in. How are we holding that dual awareness? And that dual awareness is around you being able to be cognizant of your inner experience and your outer experience as you are doing this work. So if you're in the classroom, what's the inner experience that your bias is creeping up? And then what's that outer experience that you're going to interrupt it before you act on it? Or what's even the input that's coming from maybe the kids in your class that's creating that inner experience that makes you want to act on your bias? The best way for me to also share some of this is that, our biases are subconscious. We know this. And so by the act of meditation and awareing, we become skillful at knowing what the subconscious mind is starting to bring to consciousness. And we get comfortable being aware of that. So much so that when it shows up, we can interrupt it before we act on it. Because our biases are malleable. They're never going to go away, but we can work with them. And I need to say that again. Our biases will never go away. All we can do is mitigate them. Oftentimes people will think, if I just go take this anti-bias training, I'm going to be good. If they're not teaching you how to interrupt it, then it's not good. And if they're not telling you that it's not going to go away and that all you can do is interrupt it, that's not the proper training, because it's not going to leave you. The best you can do is get skillful at knowing, one, what are your biases? And then two, how am I going to interrupt them? That's the best that you're going to be able to do, because they're always going to show up. How does this impact the brain? Like, why does meditation make this the secret sauce? And I used to hate the science around meditation, meaning like, I'm not a science person. I used to be like, forget the science. I'm just talking about lived experience. But when I actually checked in with the science, I was like, this is freaking phenomenal. And the thing is that these key parts of the brain that are critical for equity work all get activated during meditation. So literally, you don't have to try to make something happen for you to be more equitable and inclusive. if you include this as part of your work of what you're doing, if you make this your being work. So if you're actively meditating daily, you're controlling your amygdala for when you want to be triggered by a racialized experience or a gender-based experience or a class-based experience, all these isms that we have around stuff, whatever your trigger is, where your biases lie, even body size can be a bias for folks. How can you get less reactive? And then we often think that our connectivity and everything and compassion and empathy is all centered in the heart. That is not so. It begins in the brain. And then it is messaged to the heart. But the insula part of the brain is actually responsible for the amount and capacity of empathy and compassion that is held. So the more that you meditate and take that practice seriously over time, you increase your capacity for love, empathy, and compassion to be more in its natural state of expression in you. For everyone. And then the prefrontal cortex, of course, is that executive function and wellness space. When we get hijacked with the amygdala, it disconnects from the prefrontal cortex. Well, gee, when people are experiencing difficult emotions, like talking about race, and white fragility might kick in, or defensiveness might kick in, or proving my leadership as a Black woman might kick in, where I have to go into proving mode, I'll lose connection with what I need most. And that is being clear-headed and in control of my own emotions and expression. Because I've let my emotions, the amygdala, get triggered enough where I've lost connection to think clearly. And that's what shuts conversations down about equity and race generally with white people. Because they feel so, there's such a threat to safety in the emotional body that it gets the response of a physical threat to safety, which then anchors to it being a traumatic response in some way because of a past schema. So it's this vicious cycle that can be interrupted through the practice of a very non-threatening sit on a mat and breathe. And again, and then you use that sacred pause and you anchor to the breath. The last part that I will go into here before we open up for some Q&A, well, maybe 2 more slides because I just can't help myself. So then we have the 3 brain states. And when you think about these 3 brain states, the amygdala triggers the need for safety, insula connection, and then the prefrontal cortex is the ability to be able to learn. And so you're always starting, when we think about SEL and lesson design, we're always starting with connection. That's why we have a warm-up, a connection-based warm-up. And we move up the ladder to the space where now we're ready to learn, because you know what? How many times have you heard kids of color say, she doesn't like me, he doesn't like me? Because people don't take the time to establish that emotional connection and that sense of safety so that the child will even learn from you. Because what happens is that we are feeling people. We're always in the vibration of a feeling tone. That's why you can walk into a room and sense when something bad has happened in a room, like an argument or whatever, like, ooh, you walk in, you're like, oh, do I need to go back out? Same thing kids experience is a feeling tone. So if you're already driving to work and getting stressed out because you know you're going to face some of these Black and brown boys that you're having a hard time with, that you can't seem to get through to, your stress level, you've already been releasing negative stress hormone that you're then bringing into the feeling tone of the space before you even started teaching, before they've even said hello. And so this helps to quell some of that. I'm going to be quiet now and see what's in the space in terms of any sharing, questions. It's all good.
I've heard many people break down the different ways to explain the reaction of fragility or defensiveness. And not many times have people used one of the greatest tools of mindfulness, and to use how the brain science and your of fight or flight and flipping your lid and using that to explain the way that you did. And I commend you. You've really put that. It's especially for the groups that we deal with, teachers, and not just teachers, but teachers that are into mindfulness, is such a powerful tool for you to understand that you are really in that, you're reacting and not responding, and allowing that space in between for you to come in contact with your cognitive upper regions of your brain is, and that's what it is. That was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought that was great.
Thank you.
I absolutely agree. And just the idea, I appreciated you bringing in one, that biases are universal. We all have them. So a part of our mindfulness journey is increasing our awareness, but not judging it. And the idea that, I don't know, I feel free hearing that you experience that defensiveness of needing, whether it's ego, needing to prove yourself, or always trying to justify your being as an African American leader, and how that can be interpreted through the lens of bias is really valuable. And again, I say, I think this, I heard you a few months ago speak, but every time I get something more out of it. And just the idea of bringing that message, that I think it's going to tie so many things together for us.
Good, good. I'm glad. Good. Yes.
So I do have a question. You arrived in the space of mindfulness and trying to spread this into schools because of a frustration with adults and staff who were respected friends of yours, and their biases, and seeing that in your work together. I also had a frustration. It was a little different, maybe. I was teaching mindfulness to kids in a public school, and the kids are very open to this. They eat it up. The science part is, for them, I think, so important. I always think about when I was a kid, if I'd only known the way your brain works and that you do have some control. And so what you're saying about how you come into a space, I was in every classroom in the building, and normally I brought a calm and safe presence into the room, and I had that feedback. But kids they were really quick to notice where I was. They would feel me right away. And so if I was rushed or hurried, they knew it was safe to call me out on it or notice it and say, "Oh, Miss Plappert, something wrong today?" So it does. I mean, we do. However we come into a space is very important. And that awareness of it, and being able to take that sacred pause and make it right if it's not. I don't know, just observations with similar experiences in different ways.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's making me remember that also, because this is so interwoven too with being trauma responsive. We're always scanning for safety, particularly kids. They're always scanning for safety. And so that's why the feeling tone is that much more important, and the kids pick up on it because they need to gauge your mood to know just how they're going to plan their day as well. And, how playful will they be or not be? How on to the edge will they go or not go? you know, those of us who are veteran teachers know that you probably get maybe twice a year that you get to say, you know what, today, you guys, I need you to be extra kind to me. Like, I need this to be a really good day. You get to use that once or twice, but they're always scanning for safety, and they're scanning for our mood and how are we presencing the space, because we're also keeping the space safe for them.
So I didn't really completely get to what I wanted. The kids were easier for me.
Mhm.
How do you get through to the adults? The adults, I had a harder time to get buy-in, to even get respect for what I did or what I was doing with kids. I almost felt like they saw it as a threat. I know your classroom is your space, and so it's hard. And they knew me, you know, but just I'd love to pass on the value of it for educators themselves.
Yeah.
You know, how do you get through? I guess maybe I'm impatient sometimes.
Part of it is really one of a colleague of mine says that he says, I expose, not impose. And so the way that I really got adults on board was that I would always start, like I started our session today, with just a little bit of mindfulness. And I had high resistors to this. I mean, they were not trying to hear about this. And it was like 85 teachers. And I just said, you know, before every staff meeting, we're going to sit in silence for just 2 minutes, not long. I said, you don't have to participate, but you have to be quiet so that you can respect your colleagues who want to participate. So I made it like that. Like, one, I totally always kept it optional. And I knew that if they were just sitting still and being quiet, that they're almost kind of meditating. Really. I mean, it kind of like it's a default. And so I thought I'll get them a little bit in that way. And teachers are very much followers of each other, meaning they may resist administration, but once the critical mass starts to happen and they're seeing their colleagues start to benefit from something, those resistors and even those middle ground folks tend to get on board, but they may not initially. And so that was a real strategy for me, was just making it okay and giving it permission. I had some teachers come to me after saying, you know what, Tovi, I've been doing this or wanting to do this with my classes, but I didn't think it was okay. I thought I'd get in trouble. So just starting to normalize it, doing little tidbits, even with video, like on YouTube, and letting that sometimes lead your mindful moment so they can start to be exposed to resources that are out there. So just getting creative and strategic to help them get buy-in, to help them buy into the practice without really forcing it or making it any one kind of way. And there's so many apps and stuff now. I truly am a purist at it. I want to sit in silence and just breathe. That's all I want to do. I don't want to talk. I don't want to hear nobody guiding me. I just, and I do it because I do a really short one, and I know it helps for people who are not used to meditating, but because I'm always, in every PD I do, I start with meditation. So even when a principal is going to introduce me to their staff, I say, okay, that has to come after the meditation. So I automatically make it something that's experienced. And I said, this is something experiential. We can talk about it and read about it all we want to, but until you actually just try it for a moment, that's where it really plays in. So I think that that's absolutely critical. So.
I got to take your advice on that, because I've been doing you become almost the mindfulness person, right? And it ends up being that sometimes I'm going, oh my God, how much did I just talk during that mindful moment? You know what I mean? Because especially when you're doing it with, like, I started doing it at first with middle school kids, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And, it's like herding kittens. So you're going, I got to say something, because, half of them are over there like picking at each other or looking around laughing. So you're kind of trying to keep them in the mix. And now that I do it a lot more with adults, I'm going, hey, we're just going to be quiet. That's what I feel like I want to say, like, why am I still talking? So I think that's something I got to get past as I move on, is going, I'm done talking. Let you just sit here in silence.
Yes, absolutely.
Actually, someone said the other day in one of our meetings, she said, there's a lot of space where it's silence. Sound doesn't always have to fill it. And I know I did not get right what she said, but it really hit me hard. And now here you are saying the same thing.
Yeah. And our silence leaves room for that awareing as well, just leaves room for it.
I know I've been listening to some apps and I always find it annoying, and I want to say, will you just shut up? Because they make a point and then you're like, oh, let me kind of go with that. And then they're on to something else.
And one of the things that my staff also taught me, teachers, we're really smart. We will outsmart ourselves and each other. And one of the things that I often say, and that helps me with them, is that I say this, and this is one of my own quotes. So we must approach great intellect with greater emotional rigor, because we will outsmart ourselves as teachers, and people, even like people who really live in their head, have a hard time sometimes with the whole SEL piece. And so I literally let them know that we need this emotional rigor because we have to outsmart our intellect in some way. And another piece that I look at in speaking with adults in this matter, particularly as well, is when we look at the castle wheel. Like, I'll use that all the time to anchor the validity of what I'm doing, which makes me laugh. But SEL was never meant to not be integrated with academics. That's why it's the A in Castle. And so people are missing the point when they think this is not integrated work, and that the top of it is about self in the first place. So if we don't get the awareing stuff down, if we don't do this for ourselves, then we can't really properly teach it and be it. And that's why I live by this other precedent. How can we teach what we do not embody? Like, this is not something we do to kids or think we're going to do to other people. We have got to do this for ourselves and take responsibility for how we are growing ourselves in this work. And then that brings us to the paradigm shift that's trauma responsive. And I built on this one. The first two questions were not mine. First, we started with what's wrong with you. Then we opened to what happened to you. And then the question I added is, so what kind of support do you need to succeed? What does that look like? When we're culturally responsive and we're making this work, see, this work isn't just about us doing our meditation. How are we going to let it serve us professionally? And in culturally responsive work, then we start to differentiate. What kind of support do you need because of what has happened to you or who you are? Or when we look at the data, are we asking these questions? And these were offered by a high school that I worked with. These three questions were there: is the who are we serving, who aren't we serving, and how do we know? Those questions take courage, especially in equity work, because you have to admit to yourself who you're missing. Who are you not teaching? Who's not learning when they're with you? And that's painful. That is painful to face and open up to. But until we get that honest with ourselves and practice this tool of mindfulness, we're not going to get to the core of being really great teachers and educators and solving this civil rights issue of our time, which is teaching everybody. The last tool I'm going to give and share is actually on my website. COSEM's full of great tools as well. But teaching empathy can be done through storytelling. And so how can we tell each other stories and fuel racial connection and healing There's a free ebook on my website that is an actual curriculum for how to do that. How do we learn from each other based on our stories? How can we as adults in the system be telling each other our stories to strengthen connection? And then this little teaser, other book, The Creating Sacred Space to Lead from Within, talks about mindfulness and meditation and how to set up a fun altar space, like how to get the look goods and the feel goods that draw you to want to meditate. Like my altar, not the one in the book, but the one that I've generally had, is just gorgeous. Like it's so pretty. I love to go sit at it. And for me, that's like what I value in terms of getting me to the mat. Like I like nice aesthetics. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't judge it. I just know that, oh, I'm going to go sit and there's going to be this figurine of this woman leading. And I have this beautiful orchid on my altar and I have a 1 hour time thingy that's all in gold. So it's like, it just feels good to my spirit to sit there and light that candle and just breathe. And I've got little butterflies that hang from the ceiling over me to signal transformation. So I just made, and it's literally like 5 feet by 5 feet in the corner of the very room I'm sitting in right now. And I just love it. And because it's so fun and quirky and captures me, I just love sitting there. So, I think there are different angles that we get to be into this. I go on my hikes. I always stop somewhere nice and I'll sit. But, there are some folks who are like, I don't need all that. I'll just sit in a chair in the living room, and that's okay too. And some people who are like, I have a running fountain and a statue and a feather, whatever it is. It's just like, have fun with it. Have fun with it. It's so much fun. That's the other piece. I'm like, we take this meditation thing so seriously sometimes. It's so much fun. And then, when we get into our own thoughts and be like, wow, you really thought that? That's whatever the case is, laugh, have fun with it. I use 3 pillows now because I'm older and my hips hurt differently. It's like, I laugh about that sometimes. And yes, all my
Speaking of fun, here's one of my fun things that I do when I want to take a mindful moment.
Mm-hmm.
The feather I got in New Orleans one time, and it just like, I just do it for a minute and then my brain works again.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever tools we need, they are all fair. Absolutely.
Very true. You get I have an ancestral shrine that you keep everything in, and we actually came across at a flea market a very small church altar. A church bench, and it fits perfectly at the spot in front of the altar. And when I'm a little bit more serious or I'm looking for guidance from the ancestors, I meditate there. And then we live on a canal. It's muddy waters, so it's not crystal clear or anything, but it's still a canal. It's beautiful out there, and we have a tree that we saved from a beaver. We actually have a little fence around it, and we made another little altar there with 4 little spots for my wife and 2 sons. And not saying that they come out there and do it with us, but they understand the science and the reason why they should. But it depends on the mood. You go to either one for whatever self-care you need. So I hear you. I like adding little trinkets of Kemetic Egyptian and Moorish things that I'm into. And I know when I go there, I'm going there for peace. So it's I hear you. I like the aesthetics.
Lovely. And there will come a time where you're going to come home and you're going to be like, who's that under the tree? And it's going to be one of your sons, right? It's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. So yeah, wonderful.
No different than my students. They'll tell me later, they'll be like, oh, your little stupid breathing technique helps me sleep at night. And I'll be like, whatever it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll never forget. This was in the 90s, and one of my 9th graders, he was like Mr. Cool. You gonna do that thing at the beginning? Because we didn't do that. You gonna do that thing? I was like, oh, you mean sit and meditate? Yeah, that thing. So they like it. They just have to be extra chill about it. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first started doing that with kids, I did breath work. Before I even I wasn't a meditator, but I did yoga, and the breath work helped me. And so I started doing it after lunch, that crazy after lunchtime. And I
Yes.
invited kids, and the ones that just wanted to put their nose in a book and read were welcome to do that. But if you wanted to join me on the carpet, we would do some stretching and breath work. And when I'd get busy and not do that, I'd be at my desk getting ready for the next class. The kids who you would not expect to ask for it, the ones who had difficult time focusing and were very, moving all the time, would say, Miss Flapper, we haven't done our breath work. We have to do that. So that's when I knew in a third grade class, when an 8-year-old would tell me, we have to do our breath work. And it's the kid that's always moving. It's working for them. They value it. They can feel it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to reiterate that sometimes our teachers are just scared to do it. They're scared to do it. It's new for them. They don't feel confident. I just said you can't teach what you don't embody, like the whole thing, right? And so that's too why I'll show sometimes one of Kyrie's videos. I'll show one of James Butler's videos. Like I'll be exposing them to people who have short videos that you can just tap in and use someone else until it becomes easier for you. Or, what students are feeling confident, let them start to lead it.
That's what
That
they did at
works
my
well,
school.
too.
Yeah, a lot of the kids would lead. And I could have a whole gym full of kids, the entire school. And before any kind of an assembly, we started with our calming breaths and a moment of silence. And that gym would be silent. The kids could do it and knew to do it. It was a practice that they got used to, and they felt the value of it just to set it up. I have more trouble with the adults. And like you said, it's an offering, not, something, and patience is important.
Exactly.
And I think you touched on it there. It's a thing of when you teach a child this and you have them, they're ambassadors of this. You know what I mean? Like my wife went to we live in Delaware. She teaches in New Jersey, and she went to go cash a check. And the lady behind the counter was like, "Is that Kari Bay, a teacher from Delaware?" She's like, "Yeah, that's my husband." She's like, "My son has him as a mindfulness something teacher, and he told me I was stressed out and that I should be doing these breathing techniques. And it's funny, I just that you here's his check." And I mean, many kids who, like you said, they're a little too cool for school, sit in the back, seem like they're not participating, not really paying attention. And it's your consistency that no matter what, doesn't matter if there was a fire drill, we're coming back in. He's going to do that little stupid breathing thing. And here we are being mindful ninjas. And, I have high school kids that come back and go, "You know what? I use that for football before a play and helps me sleep at night." Or you have other kids who didn't have my class. They come back later and go, "One of your students taught me one of your little breathing things, and I use it because I went through that." And that right there is the best part, because it's a lot of those times where you're a farmer and you plant a seed and you can't sit there and watch it grow. You got to walk away and do some other things and take care of other parts, and it still grows. And that's what mindfulness really is meant to me when it comes to kids, is that, I had my worst write-up. I had kids that actually got up during one of my mindful moments and threw something in the trash and grabbed a napkin because she went to wipe her nose. And a principal told me that my class was out of control because while I was instructing, someone got up. I was like, it was a mindful moment and they have freedom to take care of themselves. So, I mean, it's good to see other educators out there and they know the power of what mindfulness can do. I came into teaching late, and it was a practice that I had before becoming a teacher. When I was in the Marine Corps, I practiced it in Japan, where I was kind of introduced to it. I liked the Kung Fu movies as a kid, and I used to always see the Buddha bless, and I'm going, hey, they'd always like be calm. And here I was glad to bring that practice to especially little brown and black kids, because they didn't see themselves in the practice. And Tovi, you're an anomaly when it comes to that in this field of mindfulness and yoga. A lot of kids, they were the main ones that I thought of when I first started getting official training to teach mindfulness, which I've been doing for years on my own. 20 years on my own. To see the kids go, hey, wait a minute, if you do it, I can do it. And that's what I flooded my walls with, were kids that look like them, Latino, Latinx and Black, some of our immigrant students, our second language learners. I wanted them to see themselves in this practice, because again, it's dominated by, little white women, and nothing wrong with that. Bless you that you've taken a culture, embraced a culture that has such a powerful tool. But a lot of our kids, they don't see themselves, and it's not valued. And I think that's the power in what Tovi's doing, and is your representation matters.
Yes, it does. And that reminds me, even bringing it back to, equity and inclusion, the meditation and the awareing cannot override the learning aspect of what also needs to happen for us as educators in the work. Like, we still have to do the work. We have to read the books. We have to be in the groups. We have to be in the PD. Like, the mindfulness awareing piece is the secret sauce that helps I think the synthesis and application of allyship that much better. But it doesn't replace the education part of what needs to happen for us to unlearn and relearn. Like, that is so critical. I can't stress that enough. Like, you're not going to fully become, none of us are going to fully become great allies and anti-racist just from meditation alone. It is definitely coupled with the work of educating ourselves and taking our ownness in growing ourselves in racial healing work, for sure. Absolutely. So we are down to our last very few minutes. If anyone else has anything that they would like to either add or share, we will close out. Jennifer.
I just wanted to thank you for normalizing bias in such a succinct way, because when I'm working with teachers and even talking about bias, I work with primarily white teachers in a district that's very diverse, and they often are shameful of having bias. And one of the things I try to relate to them is like, no, bias is kind of good. Like, it's part of your innate system of trying to find safety, and we want to thank our bias, but it also went haywire too. So just being able to clarify that. And then also, I'm a firm believer that mindfulness and diversity work go hand in hand. And you just doing that quick explanation of the brain and why it works, I was like, oh yeah. So thank you.
Good. Very welcome. Very welcome. Yeah. Anyone else before we close out? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Like, it means so much, because we could definitely be doing something else. And I know so many of us are zoomed out in so many ways. So thank you for spending this time with us today here at COSEM and with me for this mentorship session. And I'm just an email away if things come up after this that you're thinking about in terms of the context of what we were discussing. Happy to give any clarification or anything like that. So, all right. Take good care, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Good evening.
Thank you so much. Great